Hi there. I'd like to introduce to you Patrick Barthe. And Patrick has quite a long and storied history when it comes to logistics and working with technology and tools that help coaches make things better for their players. And right now, I'd like to just turn it over to Patrick, and he's going to show you some pretty cool tech.
Hey, how you doing, Dr. Shelton? Again, Patrick Barthe. Pleasure to meet you all. Yeah, I guess part of my story goes back to the early days of the internet where folks didn't know how to be doing a lot of this stuff to market and promote your teams. I was involved in the tennis industry and got to work on behalf of the Intercollegiate Tennis Association, which did the rankings and ratings for college tennis. So in I guess early 2000s, me and a co-founder, we created what was called collegetennisonline.com. You could go to today, where basically every single team in the country was submitting their results, which ultimately were used for rankings purposes to be able to be entered into the NCAA tournament at the end of the year. Therefore, we had widespread adoption. And it's kind of been since that I see a lot of those same tools really needing to be utilized for high school and college coaches to do any number of different things for their programs. Mainly, huge need for team management and communication tools, media and content management. Like I said, the rankings and results and calculation of that, league management, as well as all sorts of reporting tools that help the coach be more efficient. So it's with that we've kind of created a little prototype. I'm happy to walk through your students with some of those features that really kind of are integral in kind of coaching.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I'll go off here, and then I'm assuming that you are seeing my screen here that says welcome coach.
Yes, we are.
Great. So as an example, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at USC. Again, has a program out there, part of the Pac-12. So we've already, let's assume that they are kind of uniquely identified on our platform here. But what we're going to do is kind of go and create a team page with some of those things that I just mentioned. So we're going to start off with, this is kind of a back end where you can imagine certain things need to be readily available for alumni, recruits, parents as they go and start looking at these pages. So first off, when we're talking about a team page, when you're wanting to market yourself, you got to be kind of where the players and fans are themselves. So right here, you see I've kind of pre-populated some of these things. Being the team page, we know that we have to be able to point to the official site of USC. We know that they have, be it a Facebook page, we know that they have a Twitter account. So again, I'm just going to kind of show you, simply put, you have the ability to be able to kind of copy. You have the ability to be able to just paste right in. I'm going to take a YouTube page as well. Add that in, I submit. It's as simple as that, but kind of what happens on the flip side of that is you see that we have the ability then to go to those very places, right? Which makes sense. If we're a repository for all that information, then you want to be able to go access that information once it's applied.
Okay, so Patrick, so let me make sure I'm getting this. So if I'm a coach and I first want to start off using a tool such as what you have here with the Mythos product, so do I need to create a login for me as the coach, or how does that what's the gatekeeper on that?
Yeah, so again, in this sense, we want to hand the reins over to the specific program. So either a manager or someone that has kind of an official capacity with the program. In this case, we're going to be handing kind of the URLs, the usernames and passwords to your students to kind of go and create some of these pages. But in this case, yes, we would want there to be kind of an official capacity from the team to market and promote the team.
Okay, so I'm going to be logging in as the coach at some
Correct.
sub page of mymythos.gg, and
Correct.
that information will be provided to you in the accompanying materials to this particular video. But in essence, that's the idea, is that there's a layer of underneath what the user would normally see when it goes to a team page, and that I have permission to go in as a coach and then modify materials, right?
Absolutely. And therefore, some things associated with that is just like if a team coach was, didn't remember their password, they could come in and change passwords and do all those things that would otherwise be associated back to the program.
Gotcha. Okay. And so once we're in, now we're like looking at saying, so if I'm creating a team page that didn't already exist, or if I just want to come in and modify information about my program, this is the set of menu items which I'd see.
That's correct. That's
Gotcha.
correct. So again, for reference here, you're seeing things associated with kind of contact information for the program. For instance, I've got to be able to get the right information when parents, recruits, fans come and want to see this. We're going to be later talking about team rosters, which are an integral part of the team itself. We're going to talk about staff. Again, all information really important when looking at different programs. We're going to talk about contacts that have to do with like if you wanted to communicate and message your team in any number of different ways. Again, email, which becomes an integral part of kind of keeping that communication line open. We have the ability to manage video. Those are all things that we would consider to be kind of like basic communication necessary for the program to be able to communicate with the outside public.
Gotcha.
And we'll get into some additional steps later on as we continue with the video.
Okay.
Okay. So like we were talking about before, we had some initial team settings, which allowed you to be able to go back to the original team pages themselves. Second, we'll talk here about roster. So again, we have a couple of these pre-populated for you just to get you a sense of kind of what's there. But simply put, the way that we do this is we have the ability to be able to just add a new player. So again, from this standpoint, I'm just going to put my own information just to say that. But we know that if we were to go back to the official team site, we would see that they have a number of team members that are populated for each one of their individual programs. So what we're wanting to do is make that available here. So again, for the purposes of this video, again, we give a first name, last name. We can associate where they're from. We can say whether or not they, if they're from the US, maybe we say what state they're from, what year they're playing. So it could be freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, any number of different attributes associated to them. I'm going to, for the purpose of this, kind of just choose a image that's associated, and then that will populate, as well as here's an example of bio, right? So you get a sense that there's something there. When I put that in there, then again, I'm just essentially, I've populated that information. And then again, when you look at the front end of that platform, we would then be able to go to the actual roster and those should populate. And again, we will see that later on. So that is the first step. When we go to team staff, kind of the same thing. Now, keep in mind what's really cool is that, of course, we want to know who's active or inactive. So we assume that all these are actually active coaches, but the same idea is that we want to be able to see the coach, know the contact information about how to get in touch with that coach. There's always traditionally from a sports information department, kind of a bio about coach, as well as, again, we can populate it with an image. When we do that, again, we will submit those changes and that should populate. Go ahead and pause the video.
Okay, we're unpaused.
So now that we've gone from roster, again, we can start to manage staff. And what's kind of cool is that you can imagine staff can be active or inactive. So we always want to keep kind of a history of what's going on with the program. Doesn't make sense that if last year there was a coach that we just delete them entirely from the program. Instead, what we want to do is acknowledge the fact they were part of it and now they're just inactive. So in this case, again, when I see staff, we have the ability to add a new coach or whatever their particular role might be with that program. Again, we could have managers or sports information departments participating here. But again, email might be a significant part of that again. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and add a photo of a player, or excuse me, of a coach. Notice in this, if you have an image file that might be a ping or the wrong image, we just need to be able to make sure that it's a JPEG. I'm just going to do this as an example. Oh, we'll see that that image did load. Again, you would update this with the bio information that you want. And when we submit those changes, then you can see that those things are then available right there for the site. So again, simple stuff. It should just be really easy to be able to go in and edit and add new staff members. When we talk about contacts, again, this is a really unique way, and there's a couple ways that we use this within the site, but specifically what we want to make sure is that we have the ability to be able to separate or parse out, whether you're a fan, a parent, alumni, a coach, a player, or something miscellaneous, because as you can imagine, I have different types of communication that I want to be able to get out to my various constituents. So in this case, what I have the ability to search, but I also have the ability to add or delete. So in this case, what we want to do is just recognize that there is the ability to add new contacts to this, and we'll address some of this a little bit later. Managing email, simply put, if we want to be able to then send information out to any of these folks, real simple. Again, if I have a list of parents, I want to be able to go email to parents. Now, again, whatever that might be, I want to say who it's going from. So in this case, I'll just use my own particular email. And then I'll put any specific ones that weren't listed as part of my CRM. Here is my the content that I want to use. And then simply I would just enter a URL if there was something to a link or even a YouTube video that I wanted to add here. And simply by clicking send, it would go to that group. So
Gotcha.
I won't do this because I'm not going to send this to anyone at the moment, but that's how that feature would work. And that kind of ends a lot of the parts that I would call the communication and basic info that you would use as a when you're creating a team page.
Okay, so on the next section, we're going to be looking at, now that we're kind of finished with our basic team information, is going to be some content management.
Yeah, that's right. So again, just a series of tools for the team or league to publish content. And when we talk about content for a team page, we're talking about primarily video content, photo content, or stories. So as you can imagine, if you're a team, that's really kind of the lifeblood of your program, is that you want to be able to keep your team or your fans updated with the most update information. So in this case, what we're about to do right here is we're in the content management section of the team page, and we're about to add some news about the team. So we're here. This is we haven't populated anything about the team just yet. So what I'm gonna do is add a new article. Kind of got some information over here that I just want to kind of leverage. There's always specifically a title. We might want to put who it's written by, again, to give some credit. We'll put a image there and upload that image. Awesome. And then we'll go into, Now, what I always like to do, I don't know if you guys are Mac users. They have this specifically for if you're a Windows user, but in this case, they have the program called Text Editor for Mac. And I like to use that only because what it's doing is it's taking out all the rich text. So we don't want a bunch of that kind of manipulating the text itself that we're trying to paste in here. But when I put that in, now I have all of that there where, again, I have the ability, if I wanted to be able to create links or do any number of things with the kind of the module here itself. Ultimately, I want to be able to select a date that we officially release this content. And when we submit it, again, I told you before, it's kind of cool. So if we already have players associated with this program, we might find that this article that I'm publishing has to do with a couple of these players specifically. And when we save that content in this context, then we're creating kind of a repository for all the specific storylines having to do with those individual players. So kind of a nice little feature. And again,
So
the
does that help? Does that help ultimately with like searching through articles?
absolutely. I mean, because when a platform like this really kind of exists, not only to tell the story of what's going on today, but why would you want to accumulate all this? It's for historical context, right? 10 years from now, when they find out who that awesome player that's playing on FaZe Clan, and they want to go back to their college history, that you're going to want to see something like this, right? All kind of organized and charted as such. So,
Organized, and it'll be archived really forever with those tags
that's right.
that are meant to stay with that. So it's really interesting. So you really recommend, like, for when creating articles within the Mythos system is because it's a rich text editor, you really want to paste without any sort of formatting, and then go ahead and once it's pasted in there, go ahead and format it within using the text editing tools within this particular system.
That's right. That's how I would suggest doing it.
Makes
And
sense.
then the next step here is, again, we talked about a CRM system, which is your contacts. Again, makes it really nice for a coach or sports administration to be able to say, hey, we published this article. Now I want this article going out to these various groups. So again, if we had pre-populated this with the number of emails under those particular sections, that makes it really nice to just be able to do a one click and send. In this case, I'm not going to do that on the school's behalf, but we're going to just skip that process. Now, it ultimately will appear here because we have to be able to have a log of that information. But really cool is that if we were to go to the team page, notice right there, bam, you have that article sitting there front and center. And probably even more important is that when we talk about the site overall, it's important that we now see that article populated as the first article in that on the web page itself, as well as then is associated to the specific division and or conference where that content is coming. So kind of a fun little way to organize the content itself.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, I told you all about photos. Again, if you notice kind of the team page itself that we spoke of, what you don't see right now is any photos populated on this site, and that's for a reason. We're going to show you how to do some of this stuff. But there is a homepage photo that's kind of really nice that we want to be able to put up there. But first, what we want to do is add a number of different photos to be able to kind of populate a gallery. So to do that, again, you just click add new, and typically you say something like, hey, it's my 2023 team photos. And we want to, again, always associate a date, and then you could say, hey, it's my team photos. And then by adding that, simply put, it's going to ask us to select our files. Here, I'm just going to simply put these two files, and I'm going to start that upload. When I've done that, what you notice down below is we have both the images addressed. We can put any sort of metadata associated with this, because maybe I'll say, hey, this was the photo taken for whatever reason, or you get the idea. But by adding that, we also have the ability to kind of determine where these photos might go. So for the album art, so to speak, I'm just going to, for the purposes of this, just select this photo, because when we create an album, we need an album cover. We finish it, and there it is. So that will populate. Now, what's kind of cool again as well is that if I were to select a front page team photo, or of just the front page photo, I can select this, submit, and now what you should see is that now becomes that photo that's kind of front and center. Typically, Dr. Shelton, you'd see a number of schools wanting to put like the team photo of everyone associated there, like the traditional, rows of kids participating in the program with coaches and
Sure.
staff. It's typically kind of the image you see there.
I got you. But you
yeah.
can really rotate them through as much as you want, sounds like.
Really, you can, and that really comes down to kind of how proactive the programs are. But again, what we always promote or tell teams is, the more content they have, the more changes that they make, then of course the more interactions you're going to have with your community.
Yeah.
So again, here, that's kind of referring back to that album that we created. It would just create any number of different albums that we create. Yeah. And then just one more thing here in this particular section, I'll refer back to another area here, which is just about the facility itself. In this case, what we'll see is do they have a specific area for this? Well, if they did, telling us about the facility, we could absolutely copy and paste that content over into this section and go from there. So certainly something that folks want to be able to take advantage of, and you can kind of see us kind of playing around with it.
Yeah, and absolutely, because that's big for recruiting too. I can imagine, is like to talk about what you have in your battleground, what it is that you play on, like on your main stage, and then the location for fans to come and physically be there. That's going to be an important bit of information you're going to want to have attached to your program.
Absolutely. I mean, again, people always ask the question like, well, wait a second, if they already have a website that carries all this information and I can already go to this, then why would I need kind of an aggregate site to see all this content? And the answer is always the same, is if there are 3,400 colleges and universities, is it easy to go to 3,400 individual team pages, or is it easy to kind of see one place that stores all that information and points me to all the information that I want? And that's really it.
Especially when it comes to competitions, when it comes to schedules, even scrimmages.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
having it all in one area.
That's right. So that ends kind of the content management section of the team page.
Okay, so I think that covers most areas of content management. What other sort of logistics as a coach and manager are you going to want to keep track of?
Yeah, I think there are two things that we can kind of go through. The first would definitely be recruiting. For us, half the battle again is when players are out there doing their searching. It's a lot easier for a coach to kind of say what they're looking for, and then for a recruit to kind of self-identify and kind of answer the questions. So they can have some sense of whether or not they're going to meet the criteria. But how do you do that? Like, first of all, half the battle is just communicating out to the general recruiting public, right? So in this case, simply put, you want to be able to have like an area where you're identifying some of that information. A lot of this comes down to the individual programs again. Maybe they're only recruiting for League of Legends and Dota. Maybe it's that they're open to all sorts of IPs and they're just looking for, certain academic criteria. It really comes down to the individual programs themselves. But when programs kind of self-identify, I think that's where we're seeing the most success with the programs themselves. And specifically for us, again, we can get a little bit more specific, but this is just simply like the text editor that we saw in the previous, content management feature. You have the ability to kind of like just put the content you want. Again, you have the text editor to be able to link out to certain things. Maybe you're asking your players to be able to, or recruits to be able to fill out a form, something that kind of takes you down the path. But ultimately, the more information that you can provide ahead of time is always important.
Yeah. So like tryout information, and as those dates have a tendency to change or shift, or something gets added or deleted, then you can keep track of it here. If there's areas in which to include specific information on specific game titles, reels in which to upload, you can offer those links on how to do that and that information here.
Absolutely. And then the last section that I would kind of, well, and again, Dr. Shelton, we've talked in the past. One of the reasons why I think it's so important that sites like this exist is because the information's not always readily available. And when the section that I'm going to talk about right now is the results and schedule, I tell any number of your students, go out there and start looking at these individual team pages that are built, and you'll see it kind of similar to USC right here. You've got a ton of great content. They're generating some news. Again, from a recruiting standpoint, they've got some information about what's going on, for what they're looking for from a tryouts perspective. But when it comes to schedule, it's kind of absent. And that could be for a couple different reasons. One, they could have 5 different teams that are doing 5 different things, and maybe they can't manage it all. But from us trying to grow college esports as a whole, that's kind of really central in having any sort of fans, is they have to know where to follow you, right? They have to know where you are, what the results are, if they're really going to kind of get behind it and get excited. So again, that's why we kind of built into the Mythos platform some really easy ways to be able to kind of just do some basic scheduling. So for instance, the underpinnings of this entire thing have there's a symbiotic relationship between all the different teams. You can't post someone on your schedule as USC in this instance without it affecting the other team's schedule as well, because they share that relationship. So in this case, what we simply do is we say, hey, we're USC. If we want to be able to compete against another team that's in a different division, fine. But we have the ability to kind of locate those actual divisions. We have the ability then for you to find the program that you're looking for. You can decide whether or not that's a home or away match. You can put a date. So in this case, we'll actually, I think I have to put an older date. Sorry. We will say or specify the time in which that's occurring. You'll say whether or not it's a conference match or a region match. And then when we add that to the schedule, then we get an error. So I will go back here. What we're going to do is we are going to see 2001, 2022. Part of the reason why we're seeing that right there is because it has to be part of the actual season itself to be added. I'll see if this works. And it did. So again, if you can imagine, so the reason we saw an error is because you have to have a season to exist before you can actually add a result to that season. In this case, when we have the 2021 season, now we can add a match for that. And in this case, then simply put, first of all, what that looks like
So it's good in a way. It actually shows you that there was some user error on your input
Yeah,
in a way that was illegal. So it's like, oh, I actually need to correct this information.
that's a nice way to put it. I like that. And then so it's on the schedule, but then a couple things. This is a hyperlink, so if you're a coach, yeah, you might want to go look at that team page. But simply put, I have the ability then to be able to go into that result. I have the ability to change the details. Maybe my match got rescheduled from a 1 o'clock into a 4 o'clock game. So I could put that. But ultimately, I want the ability, and again, it depends on the game itself. But if, let's say, it's a 6v6 player game, I could say, hey, this player was playing for me. That player was there. You get the idea. I get to put my team. I select the players from the opposing team, and then I put the results. And simply put, once you submit that, that record now goes in not only again for USC's result, but if we're playing against, I think we said Auburn University here, it would show up for theirs as well. And then we'd be able to actually see that ultimately on our team schedule, which again, really important when we're talking about programs and competition and following the action.
Yeah, and then based upon these results and results of the matches, then all sorts of interesting things can happen metadata wise, right? So theoretically, rankings could get calculated. It would maybe self-populate a conference results sheet, right? So wins, losses, ties, things like that.
Absolutely. So again, it's kind of done behind the scenes, but essentially when you have a number of results that are part of a cohort, again, which is essentially saying, call it a season is a cohort, right? Like that's a specific start and end time. When you take those results, we have an algorithm kind of mapped to those results that we can then calculate the results themselves, and the algorithm can weight maybe a home versus an away match. It weights any number of different attributes of the algorithm itself and allows us to be able to kind of digitally or kind of just calculate those results with the click of a button. It's really what it comes down to. And ultimately, like we did in the sport of tennis, that's what we did, and ultimately created the national rankings throughout the season, and then used those to select those teams that were in the championship at the end of the year. So all those things can apply here as well.
And I know the question is going to come up. So what if you happen to be on the losing end, or you think that someone from the other team had actually put in the scores, the results of the match, and something is in there that you disagree with, or you feel is contested or something like that, then there is an opportunity for you to approve those, whatever scores were input for any specific match, or
that's right. So
contested.
Yeah, there are two fail safes kind of behind the whole thing. I won't log out and log back in as an administrator, but as an administrator overseeing this, if there's a dispute, you can challenge any of those matches, which ultimately don't go to just the coaches trying to determine that, but go to an administrator that ultimately can get to the answer. Typically, if you see things like that in the 15 plus years that I was doing that, it never came down to really people being malicious. Instead, it really came down to just user error, fat fingering a number or something like that. But there is a fail safe in there to be able to, one, dispute a match, and two, have an administrator go and essentially rectify the situation.
So the power of this data is kind of incredible, because if as you imagine, you put in years, or you could even perhaps put in previous year's results, as they have for things like, baseball and football and all the other things that keep records and statistics within database types of systems. So you could say like, oh, well, in the past 15 years, these teams have split their matches, 8-7. You can look up previous scores. You could say like, when the games actually began or certain rivalries began. And then you can also, have the potential of looking up individual players and sort of show their winning records, their the teams they do better against. Look for those optimal lineups. Once you start pulling out the data that's actually stored in a system like this, it's really sky's the limit.
It really is sky's the limit. I think I couldn't have said it better myself. The only other thing I would say is, again, coaches internally might want to use it for scouting purposes. Yeah, that's right. Really, sky's the limit. And really, if we want to see the growth of of collegiate esports or high school esports, we need technology like this or repositories of data, because nothing gets people more excited about why they should care about a championship this year unless they kind of have the historical context of why it's important, right?
Absolutely.
And that's why we get so excited about Super Bowl, and why we get so excited about anything. It's because there's always a historical context of why it's important today.
Patrick, I want to thank you very much for your time and in giving us just a taste of what this type of tool can provide to new coaches, and how they might track the important pieces of their particular team, help them manage and keep everything together in one spot. So thanks for the overview.
Thanks, and good luck to your students.
Thanks.